Hello, my name is Elizabeth Nosek, and I'm the Curator of Education and Exhibits here at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Today, as part of our Small Wonders series, we are taking a closer look at our new exhibit in the lower gallery. It's called Across the Fruited Plain, Migrating West to Colorado by Railroad. In the first video we did about this exhibit, we looked at the overall topic of how the railroad helped to settle Colorado. In this presentation, we are examining some of the reasons immigrants wanted to make Colorado their home. Immigrants came to Colorado in the 19th and early 20th centuries for much the same reasons that they come today: opportunity. These opportunities, of course, varied from person to person. Sometimes migrants were drawn to something specific, while at other times they were simply escaping from unbearable conditions in their homelands. The first influx of newcomers drawn to Colorado came well before railroad's arrival. Gold discoveries were followed by silver, lead, copper, and coal. Tight labor markets in the 19th century enabled unskilled workers to command higher wages than their counterparts on the East and West Coasts. Immigrants with skills in high demand were especially valuable. George Pullman was from Chicago. He saw a need for a more comfortable passenger car for those traveling by railroad. Now, his idea was to build and operate luxurious railroad sleeping cars for passengers. To generate the necessary capital for his venture, Pullman traveled west to Colorado, where he operated a ranch and trading store outfitting miners near Golden. After 2 years, he returned to Chicago and started the successful Pullman Palace Car Company, which would revolutionize train travel. The railroads also provided people with a new and more accessible way to explore the West's uniquely beautiful landscape. Coupled with the Industrial Revolution and the growth of a new middle class, an entirely new concept known as vacation took root in the 19th century. Colorado's geography was ripe for pushing boundaries. Railroads allowed tourists to experience remote attractions that were previously reached only by rough mountain trails. Tourists visited new mountain resorts, families built cabins, and the wealthy bought hobby ranches in the mountains to escape the heat of the summer on the plains. They took excursions for fishing and gathering wildflowers, and memorialized their experiences by taking photographs with the relatively new hobby of photography. Tuberculosis, or as it was known at the time, consumption, was the leading cause of death in our nation in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. With no known cure at the time, many doctors encouraged patients to seek out a drier climate with plenty of fresh air and sunshine. Colorado had all three. Thousands flocked to Denver and Colorado Springs, thinking that they might find a cure in the area's fresh air and mile-high altitude. During this period, it is estimated that 1 in 3 Colorado residents suffered from tuberculosis. Known as lungers, these migrants came to Colorado searching for good health. Entire cities with names like Montcalm, Sunnyrest, Hygiene, and Craigmore sprang up around TB treatment facilities. Railroad advertisements described the air of the Rocky Mountains region to be buoyant and delicious, bracing and exhilarating, and clear, brilliant, and intoxicating. In fact, by 1890, 1/3 of Denver's population, an estimated 30,000 invalids, had arrived by rail seeking a cure. By 1920, that number had climbed to 40%, or 100,000, of the city's overall population of 250,000. A writer for the New York Times, Grace Greenwood, reported that the town is crowded with tourists and invalids, and I sometimes wonder that the overtaxed hospitality of the people here does not give out. As New York City's population exploded between 1850 and 1930, so did the number of the city's orphans. In a concentrated effort to find homes for these children, placing out programs that sent orphan children west by train came into favor. The forerunner of today's foster care system was the Children's Aid Society, founded in 1853 by Reverend Charles Loring Brace, who found himself appalled by the number of street children he saw running loose in New York City. His intent in the beginning of the society was to get homeless and abused children out of their wretched surroundings and send them to kind Christian homes in the country. The society raised funds, arranged discounted train fares, and if parents could be found, arranged the legal permission needed to relocate them. Children were sent across the United States, including Colorado communities like Flagler, Colorado Springs, Glenwood Springs, Peets, Boulder, Webster, Seibert, Pueblo, Denver, Brush, Alamosa, and Manassas. These cities welcomed over 1,500 of these orphans. Between 1854 and 1929, around 400,000 urban children were taken from the streets and tenements and sent to new homes in rural America. It was an unprecedented social experiment. Starting in the 1870s, Western railroads were not only in the transportation business, they were also in the land sales business. Government land grants had bestowed hundreds of thousands of acres on the railroads as subsidies. However, this land had little value unless it could be sold. Many people living in the eastern U.S. were interested. So too were plenty of overseas immigrants. As railroads opened new territories to travel and settlement, a variety of backgrounds and nationalities followed. By the late 19th century, the American railway system was playing a central role in settling the West. Advertisements promoting cheap land for sale were a primary driver. Not only did railroads sell future ranchers and farmers their land, they also brought the newcomers west and helped them establish their farms and ranches. Railroads then transported the resulting grain, dairy, and cattle to markets across the country. Many agricultural colonies sprung up throughout the state. Encouraged by the railroads, colonists purchased shares in a community and worked together to dig irrigation ditches and build communities founded on similar principles. Some achieved great success, such as the Union Colony in Greeley, the Fountain Colony in Colorado Springs, and the Chicago Colony in Longmont. The desire for religious freedom has proven to be a significant motivator for immigrants throughout our country's history. This has often been inseparable from people's efforts to make a better life for themselves and their families. The fact that the concept of religious freedom is enshrined in our First Amendment of the United States Constitution most likely inspired countless immigrants to make their way to the United States. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Peter Strayer brought his family to America from Kovala, Russia, to escape the pogroms. These mob attacks, where people were beaten and property destroyed, took place throughout the Russian Empire. Their purpose was to encourage non-Russians, especially Jews, to leave the country. Peter Strayer took the hint. Like many Jews in the later part of the 19th century, the Strayers entered the country through Galveston, Texas, traveling northwest to Denver by rail. They were most likely sponsored by a Hebrew society in the eastern part of the United States. These groups sponsored Jewish immigrants coming to America, but sent them west where they would not add to the already overpopulated Jewish communities that could be found in such areas as New York City, Boston, and Philadelphia. As the country's network of railroads grew, so too did the need for workers to lay track, maintain locomotives and cars, trundle packages and freight. Other workers served customers on passenger cars, and still others worked along the tracks at depots and restaurants like Harvey Houses. In fact, the railroad employed many of the immigrants they had brought west in search of their own American dream. Farmers like Ephraim Goebel became carpenters and night watchmen. William Coulter continued in his father's tradition of being a Pullman porter, and still others, like Catherine Macy, came west to work as a waitress in Harvey Houses. Throughout history, people have come to Colorado for a variety of reasons. As you see, the railroad not only provided transportation, but in many cases a livelihood as well. This exhibit, Across the Plain, Migrating West to Colorado by Rail, will be up through the end of 2021 and features the stories of 10 people who migrated west by rail to Colorado in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. I invite you to visit the museum and get to know their stories.
Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Commenting and sharing in particular may qualify as virtual engagements for important funding programs like the SCFD.